Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Happy Life with Maria podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest who is
Awesome.
who is a, who is a private basketball trainer and coach in New York City, Mr. Dash. Welcome,
Hello,
welcome to the
hello, hello.
show. Thank you so much for
I'm honored. Thank
joining.
you. No, of course, of course.
Thank you for
I'm excited.
joining. You're excited. I'm excited. I'm excited.
All right,
So let
all
me
right,
let
good.
me let me share my story first. Let me share how I connected with you. So we both, to those who don't know, we both go to the same dance school, Salsa Sabrosa in New York City. Salsa
Right,
dancing, super fun classes. You should all go.
throw it up.
and and we connected there a few months ago, and then I guess a little more recently, once I started the podcast, we connected again, and I discovered all these things about what you do and who you are a little bit more deeper, and I was like, oh, very interesting person to connect with.
And likewise, likewise. Yeah.
So I thought it would be super fun to talk a little bit about your journey and what you do, and your kind of overall life journey.
The, the,
So
the
okay, so
yeah.
why don't we start from the beginning and share a little bit about what you do and how you got started.
Okay. Well, it started. I woke up in a hospital, uh, crying, and it was I say my mom and dad were holding me. Uh,
Uh-huh.
not that far back, not that far back.
Okay.
No, no. So my journey starts. So I grew up playing basketball in New York City. Born and raised in New York City. Very proud. City so nice they had to name it twice. Um,
Yeah.
but um, but I found that as I was finishing up high school and going into college, I had one college that was looking at me for basketball, which was John Jay. Um, but as I got to college, I realized very quickly that uh, I wasn't quite the athlete that I thought that I was in my head. Like the physical reality and the mental delusion didn't add up. So I had to redshirt for a year, which meant that I could practice with the team, but I could not play. Uh, so what I ended up doing was I went back to my old high school, and I had done a little bit of coaching with like the Junior Knicks program, which was like for kids kind of like 5 to 9 years old when I was a senior in high school. But I went back to my old high school, and my head coach needed help, and I was his assistant coach for a year, and then ended up, pardon me, I ended up failing out of school
Ooh.
actually because well, I thought college was going to be like, oh, you get to take all the classes you want to take now, which wasn't the case. You still have to take math and do all this stuff, and I admittedly was not a motivated student. So
Okay, okay.
I failed off the team. When I did that, I went back and coached again, and basically the next year, the head coach who was there at John Jay had gotten fired, and his assistant, who I was very close with, um, knew that I had been coaching for a couple years, and I had made a lot of connections within New York City basketball and the high school with other coaches. So he brought me on as an assistant coach, and I was a 19-year-old college coach, which was weird because most of the guys on the team were older than me, and
Wow.
so that was a great lesson in learning kind of how to fake it till you make it kind of deal.
Right, yeah,
Um,
sounds like you were like much younger.
yeah, but what I found was as after coaching college for a couple of years, I got some high school jobs, and I hooked up with my current boss now, who I've been training her kids since they were 7 and 4. Um, But what I found was I was kind of embodying this ideal of what I thought a coach was supposed to be based off my own experiences with coaches growing up. So I thought you're supposed to scream and yell. I thought you're supposed to put, there was a lot instead of like breaking down to build back up, there was a lot of just breaking down. And then it was kind of up to the players to build themselves back up, which it's a lot easier for an adult to do than a 10-year-old. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's what I was conditioned to think that was what a leader and a coach was supposed to do. So I ended up screaming and yelling at the kids, and you know like more of like a drill sergeant, which is so funny because it wasn't like that wasn't my personality at all. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that was just what your
It,
experience was, and you thought that's what you're supposed to do.
yes. So it became this like weird, like almost like alter ego thing. But then I, I probably like around 2015, 2016, through a series of events. Now I'd like to say that we're all on a spiritual journey. We just don't know it all the time.
Okay.
This is when I kind of became aware of the shift that was sort of happening inside of me. And uh, we actually didn't talk about this the last time I talked, but I would be open to sharing it. I haven't
Yes,
told many
yes.
people. I've actually, this is very few people have heard the story, but
Uh,
I would like this. I feel like this is a good platform for this. But it
please
was the
share.
I was I was sitting outside of my house. It was a beautiful summer day. I didn't have practice until later. I had a couple training sessions later, so my morning was very free. And I was sitting outside of my the stoop, and I was staring at this tree that had, been outside my building forever. And I've walked by probably 20,000, 30,000 times at this point and never really paid attention to, but all of a sudden I just couldn't not stare at this tree. Uh, and I don't know why. Couldn't to this day I couldn't tell you. But what ended up happening was I I started to this feeling kind of came up in me. There was and that almost there was like a cessation of thought, where thought it wasn't that thought stopped. We have that inner dialogue that just keeps going. It's like mental diarrhea or some
Yes,
shit.
yes,
It didn't stop, but what it felt like was, have you ever been underwater
yeah,
and you hear people talking above the water, but it's like,
yeah, yeah.
that's what the thoughts started to sound like. They were
Wow.
there, but there was this, and looking at this tree, and all of a sudden, this, I can't even describe this feeling. It was just like the biggest smile I've ever had on my face, and I couldn't stop. And what came to me was, the best way I could say, I was the tree, and the tree was me.
Okay, okay. That's amazing.
That that there was, I didn't, I've always been told what a tree is. I never actually know what a tree or anything is really. And all of a sudden that started to apply to everything. So as I'm walking down this, I got up from the stoop after like 30 minutes of staring at this tree. And I was like, oh, the fire hydrant, that's me too. Oh, that's uh, the uh, the brick on the wall, that's me. People probably thought I was a part of my life, thought I was like a fucking creep because I was smiling at them so intensely as they walked by. But I was like, they're me too. Like, there's no, uh, this idea of a personality had kind of disappeared for a little bit.
Ah,
And everywhere I just was smiling. I just couldn't stop smiling. And now that feeling dissipated, slowly. It never, that the memory of that has never left me.
yeah,
But I
because it
couldn't call,
sounds like it's like a special like connection you felt, right? Right? You felt connected
it,
to
it
everything.
was the first time I consciously felt oneness. Whereas before, I think, through anything, times when if you're doing any kind of group activity, there's times when you can feel very connected to the group. Usually it's on a subconscious level or an unconscious level. This was the first time in my life where I ever just viscerally felt that oneness. There's the the waves of existence, but underneath the waves, there's the reality, which is oneness.
We are all connected. We're all one.
Yes, absolutely. And
Wow.
so that's the first
Wow.
one I felt, and that sort of started a series of uh, shifts in my life, I guess you could say.
Wow.
And it definitely made me start looking at things differently too, and almost like not monitoring my own behavior, but watching my own behavior and realizing, like, and to bring it to basketball, I started to realize like this wasn't making me happy. I had these goals initially of wanting to be a high Division 1 basketball coach, but I started to realize like one, the screaming and the yelling wasn't making me happy, and this goal that I was striving for wasn't actually true. It was for me, what I realized was more of looking for a sense of validation of sorts. And I
Oh.
wanted to be recognized. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to, people to know that's Dash, and he's a Division 1 coach. Um,
Yes, 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 yes. So it
yeah,
sounds like you were having kind of like that moment of connection, and then as you were going through life, you looked at everything differently, and you started questioning the norm. You started questioning what you were doing. You're like, is this really something that's making me happy, or am I just?
yes. Or am I just living out of fear? I think that's the best way I could describe it. Was living out of fear of not being seen, fear of not being. We do feel very small in this world sometimes, and that's okay. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm okay feeling. If Earth is a speck of dust in the grand scheme of existence, I am a speck of a microspeck of a, yeah, like, and that's okay. I'm okay. It actually takes a lot of the burden of and uh, I don't have to feel so important. What I'm doing is so important. It's just I'm here and enjoying life. Um, but we do often feel like the best way I could describe it is orphans of the universe, where we were kind of just plopped here. And one day we wake up and we're alive and we don't really know exactly how we got here or where we're going and where we're going after. So I think my mentality before was trying to grab a slice. I wanted people to know me. I wanted to be seen that way. That uh, I wouldn't have to think about my smallness in the universe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Where and So basically, I'm also, again, we said, I'm kind of all over the place with this stuff
No,
too.
no, I understand what you're saying. You were saying that, that helped you shift your focus away from what you thought you would be doing and you were supposed to be doing, but then you noticed it wasn't making you happy. You don't like the yelling. You don't like to achieve that high achievement because that's not what fulfills you, right? Was that the feeling what you didn't feel
Right.
that
Yes.
fulfillment?
The fulfillment, because, well, it's constantly like that idea that, like, well, once I get this, I'll be happy. And that chasing that carrot it never works. It never makes you happy. It never, I thought, well, all right, well, I got this college coaching job. This is going to make me happy. Oh, but I'm an assistant. Now I got the head coaching job in high school. This should be making me happy. Um, and again, I don't think that just applies to work. I think that applies to, I mean, I think all of us can uh, empathize with the idea that, like, how many times we've been in relationships where this person's going to make me, once I get this person, it's going to make me happy. Uh, once I,
Yeah.
once I get to go on this trip, I'll be happy. And then, whatever you feel is momentary joy. Um, and maybe sometimes slightly long lasting momentary joy, but it's still momentary. It's still, it's not something that's constant. And I think that's something that I realized was, it's almost the saying I love is, it's no different than when you're a kid and you're craving the candy bar. Well, once I get the candy bar, I'll be happy. And you get it and you're still not happy. It's
Oh,
not,
wow.
it's
That
not
is
going to, and so
that's such a true explanation though. That's exactly it. We feel like once I get that candy or once I get that person and I'll date them, I will be so happy. I will be so
Ah,
full of joy. But that doesn't really work that way. That's so interesting
no,
that you mentioned that. That's exactly, yeah, I think that's definitely the truth in life.
yeah, and it's it's not to say that we don't still have desires and wants. It just means that we can recognize that those desires and wants are also momentary, and we live in a world of impermanence, and
Yeah, yeah.
and so to go back to the coaching, I think it got to the point where I realized that I was chasing this carrot that was never going to fulfill
It
me,
wasn't going to fulfill you.
and I felt very empty. And it's funny. I around my birthday in October, uh, I looked back at my old laptop at some of the old writing I did when I was in my early 20s, because I used to do some like free form writing and uh, poetry and stuff like that for a very short time in my early 20s. Uh, and I looked back and it was really depressing. And I was really and I was achieving, at the time. Like, I remember I was getting these coaching jobs, and I was dating the girls I remember the particular ex I was with at the time when I was 23, and how I'd wanted to be with her forever, and I was still very, like, this writing was not happy writing. um
Wow, wow.
and so I my focus started to shift away from college basketball at this point, and a little more into high school, but also very much just youth sports in general, youth basketball in general.
But how did you know to kind of shift the focus away from? So you knew you didn't like the basketball, the college, and all that. But what gave you the idea, like, to
I
try other things? You were just gonna try it out.
I made some really great connections coaching in college. Got lifelong friendships that you know to this day, you know not just on holidays, we reach out to each other and check up. And actually, one of my players just he's being inducted into the John Jay Athletics Hall of Fame, and he
Oh,
called me to let me know, and said he wants me to be. I was like, oh, this is great. But I realized that
congrats.
the impact I wanted to have was more on the level of, not because it almost comes off preachy, but I wanted to share, and I felt like at the youth level I could make more of an impact on their
Yes,
lives,
yes, 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 yes. That
um,
makes sense.
and maybe open up their eyes to the possibility that there are other things aside from basketball too. The ball stops bouncing eventually, you know,
Oh,
uh, and that there's other, you need not need to, but it might behoove you to add some color to your life and try some different stuff. I mean, and like we've talked about before, that's kind of what attracted me so much to dancing, and why I decided to. I was starting to feel a little stagnant, and I felt like I wanted a little more color in my life, and I felt like that movement of salsa and the joy that everybody was having, and you know, uh, that Renzo really helps cultivate. But it was something that I felt uh, pulled towards, and I felt like that's something I wanted to share with my players. Find that out. There's something more than basketball, because the ball. If you're lucky, if you're as lucky as you can get, by 35, you're done playing serious competitive basketball. That's if you're like really lucky. Unless you're LeBron James, and then you're playing into your 40s. But 1 out of 10 billion are your odds of being that. So for the most part, you are going to be done with basketball by probably the age of 25, and highly competitive at least. And I wanted them to understand that there is more to life. And a lot of them come from places where that's not something that's discussed. That's not something that's focused on. It's all the focus is on this sport. for understand, some of them feel it's their only way out of their circumstances that they're in, and a lot of pressure is put on them because of their talents. Um, and they
Right.
never really get to explore these other dimensions of their lives.
So
And that's why,
walk me through, for example, like walk me through like what normally is, I guess, like the favorite part of your coaching or training that you do. What is like your favorite kind of part about it? Do you get to be on one-on-one with them? Do you get to kind of teach them about life? Like how does that usually go?
my my favorite moments are always off the court.
Off
Because
the court.
on the court, I enjoy. I mean, look, I enjoy what I do, and I love being on the court. And I'd like to think I'm good at it, hopefully. Um, but you know, we're there. We're on the court for an hour, maybe. Um, and you can actually. I mean, I've had some really interesting conversations while we're working out, but for the most part, we're pretty focused on skill development, and so it's not really a lot of time to shoot the shit. You know, but my favorite times have been off the court, where we just get to talk, and a lot of times where they let their guard down, um, because there is something so that sports in general, especially for for guys, can be a lot of machismo, and it's I'm going to put this wall up so you'll see, you won't see how vulnerable I am. But it's when we're off the court that you actually get to talk and get to know the players as people, their hopes and their dreams and their fears. That's the stuff that really drives me. That's the stuff that like I really enjoy, because you start to realize that you know I think in life everybody's going through something. Everybody's dealing with something or struggling with something, and uh, a lot of times we don't have people we feel safe talking to about it. Um, and I'd like to think that that's what I am able to provide is a space, is a listening space, and I'm
Safe
not afraid to
space.
call.
Safe
Yeah,
space
and
for
doesn't mean
them.
to say I'll call them out on their bullshit when they're when they're going crazy and messing up. But I think that the really cool thing is too, I don't come at them from the perspective of I'm this adult and you need to listen to me. I'm the one, I know better than you do. Because here's the fact of the matter. I don't know if you grew up. I was always, you're always told, respect your elders and those. And I said, but a lot of times I found just because someone was old didn't mean they were wise.
Yes, age
Uh,
doesn't define you.
no, I've I was actually having this conversation with someone recently. Um, but I'm 33, but I don't feel 33 because also I don't know what that means. I don't know what that, I remember being 25 and someone saying, "Oh, does it feel? Well, how's it feel being 25?" And I'm like, kind of the way 24 felt, I guess, and actually similar to the way 23 felt, and kind of the way 22 felt as well. There was never this idea that like I remember, turning 30 and people, "Oh, this is a big deal. 30, it's here." And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, it's kind of the same. I mean, and the funny thing is, I feel better in my body now than I did when I was 21. Uh, I feel that I say the one thing that I've been very appreciative of with age has been perspective. But I never. But one of that part of that is also recognizing that I don't have the answers, and that saying I don't know is one of the most profound things you can say. Uh, and I think that's something that is one of the reasons why I'm able to connect so easily uh, with my players, is because I don't approach them the perspective of, oh well, I know everything and I know so much better than you. A lot of times it's just I can offer you a little bit of perspective from my experience, but also recognizing that your experience and my experience, though on a deeper level, are similar, uh, are vastly unique uh, in reality.
Hmm.
So I think
I know.
that's my favorite part is that connecting, and where it's, you know, these are like my brothers. They're not, you know, like a lot of times coaches kind of look at players. These are my sons, and I have to, you know, I'm I'm growing just as they're growing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand. I understand. That's such an interesting journey. It sounds like you kind of went from, um, trying to achieve what everybody says you try to achieve, trying to behave the way everybody tells you have to behave. And then I guess reality hits and you actually live it. And you're like, wait a minute, this isn't really what I want to live as. And wait a minute, I want to see if there's something else for me that would make me a little bit happier. And I like that you kind of took the chance, you take that risk, and you kind of tried out something completely away from what the society dictates should be. And you kind of just went with, well, I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to do what I feel is right for me. This may be different from what the norm is, but I have to do what's right for me and try it out and see what happens. It's interesting because I think it's like that analogy you gave me to like take the shot, right? Because when we were connected before, I was
Right.
having an issue with. I was like, oh, I don't know if I should post on Instagram or whatever some of my, tips on life and like all the podcast stuff. Because what if people don't want to hear it? What if people don't like it? And you gave me a really interesting tip. You were like, you don't know, right? At least take the shot,
You
right? Throw that
you
ball.
missed. I mean, now granted, I did not coin this phrase, though I would love to take credit for it. But you miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly, exactly. That was such an
and
interesting analogy for me. It's like, wait a minute, you have to at least throw the ball to see what
yeah,
happens.
see, you know, you got to try some shit, and if it, you know, if it sticks, it sticks, and if it doesn't, but it, uh, I think there's that idea of, you know, we don't. Uh, Jonathan Larson, who's a famous playwright who wrote Rent and Tick Tick Boom. You know, one of the songs in one of the show is he says, uh, "Cages or wings." Uh, and so, are you living out of fear or are you living out of love?
Ooh,
And that living out of fear can make us, that can make us small in a way I don't think we really enjoy feeling small. Uh,
yes.
and that living out of love can be scary. It can be very scary. Living out of love, for ourselves, for others, telling others that we love them, can be incredibly scary. So I think, but yes, taking that shot is living out of love,
Yeah,
and
that was actually perfect. It was perfect what I needed to hear. So I love that. And I feel like sometimes in life that's just how it is, right? You have these fears and doubts and thoughts in your mind, and they stop you from actually taking action, taking a step forward, because the inner dialogue that's going in your mind is really like the number one thing that I feel that stops people in anything is that inner dialogue. It's
is
really not
yes,
other people, it's really themselves.
we we are the wardens and inmates of our own prisons. And
Yeah.
that is a very, very harsh thing to realize.
But once you realize that you're in control, that you can change your behavior, you can change your environment, you can change your life by changing your inner dialogue, by changing your inner beliefs, by changing your inner thoughts about how you view yourself, how you view others. You really have the power. It's really you who can go and change whatever you don't like in your life. That's also pretty kind of powerful to know about ourselves.
That, I think it's one of the most freeing things that we have as humans is imagination. And that imagination we're allowed, you know, when talking about the inner dialogue, it's not none of, I would say 98%, at least for me personally, 98% of my inner dialogue is very negative shit. sorry for cursing too,
But that's a lot of
but
people.
it's not. Yeah, it's very negative stuff, and it's always it's typically self-preserving. But again, in a very small way, living in fear. Well, what if I ask this girl out and she says no? Ah, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. And now here we go. I'm in the same place that I was without any bearing in reality because I don't know what the answer is going to be. And so I realized something, it's something that I think is a daily practice that I think most of us probably deal with is trying to sort out what is an actual conscious thought that we are making and what is unconscious, conditioned, compulsive thought. And that is usually our inner dialogue is that conditioned compulsive thought. It's mental diarrhea. It's no bearing in reality. But when we start to actually say to ourselves, well, because if we had the choice, right, we would probably want to just have pleasant thoughts. So why are we even listening to this inner dialogue? Where that's when we start to, like you said, kind of take ownership almost and say, this is
Yeah,
now.
because I feel like one thing that people kind of, I guess, miss is that this inner dialogue, this negative kind of repetitive thing that we have been conditioned to believe from childhood or whatever, when everybody tells you, no, you don't do this, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, you have to behave, you have to be quiet, and that becomes, your norm. But what I feel like a lot of people should really understand and realize as adults, which I feel they should really teach in schools, is that you have the ability to change that inner dialogue. You are the one that are making those thoughts. So you have the ability to actually choose a different thought pattern. You can choose to kind of reprogram yourself to
Mm.
be more on the positive side. It's literally like, because from what I understand, we're getting a little deep now, but from what I
Let's
understand,
let, 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 let's dig. Let's get deep. Let's
we're
dig.
getting, from what I understand about the brain, a lot of the negative things is or anything really, the program that runs through our mind is in the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is really from the beginning, from like earlier days, from whatever has been a repetitive story in your mind. Repetition is how things get into the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is literally the program that's running your life, the program that your brain learned and is operating by. It's like an operating system if you analyze it with the
Mhm.
computer. So in order to change that built-in operating system of yours, right, you have to change the subconscious. And the one way that I know that is really, really effective is repetition, right? The subconscious can be changed by repetition. So if you choose, to create whatever small thing you want to start with, whatever small thing you want to start with, let's say to think about yourself in a positive way, to think that you are powerful, you are, an amazing person. So I would say maybe you go in every morning or every evening, you create that pattern in your mind, repetition every day for, let's say, 45, 60 days. You tell yourself, I'm amazing, I am powerful, everybody enjoys connecting with me, something like that. Pick something super simple and try repeating
Affirmation.
that.
Yeah.
Right, and try repeating that every day for 60 days in a row. And that repetition, see what happens. That repetition will affect the subconscious, will become your program. And that will kind of be the new thought pattern that you will create. And you can do that with whatever you want to accomplish. You just have to make sure you have small goals at a time. Don't try to do everything at a time. Small goals is how I feel. So I feel
I
like,
have $1 billion in my bank account.
you can start with that, but
Yeah.
I doubt that's gonna happen that quickly.
It'll take some time. It'll take some time.
But it
Um,
will get you thinking in that direction. So
Absolutely, true, true, yeah, I mean, and life is energy and momentum, and uh, I agree, and I actually, it's something I talk to my players about a lot too, is that idea that not only does our thought patterns shape how we feel, because these are basically just computers, our brains are just computers, processing systems, and this is not even like we're not even getting deep into the woo woo. spiritual jargon, but
Let's get into it.
but on a scientific level, they say what we actually are seeing right now with our eyes is not reality. It is our way of our brains making sense of reality,
Perception of it, yes.
perception. So what we see gets drawn in, it gets processed in light speed, and then projected back out to us as if we're watching our own movie almost. But the interesting thing is, if we think about it in those terms, we are also that is also being processed through our conditioning, like you said, from a young age. Well, and it's something I when I used to work at my old middle school, we used to have a thing called I started a program called In the Flow, where 3 times a week, my middle school basketball team, we would meet and sort of just have free flowing discussion. Sometimes I'd have little activities for them to try. Like I found they couldn't keep eye contact when speaking, so we did a thing where they would basically just stand and keep rotating, spending a minute talking to someone, but for that 1 minute, they couldn't take their eyes off the person. Even if it made them laugh, if it made them uncomfortable, whatever it was, they had to just, pardon me,
Yeah.
had to maintain that eye contact.
Wow.
Uh, but one of the things we did, I remember one day, I didn't even really plan this. We were sort of having this discussion about what it means to be a man. Uh, and we were finding that it really was taking on significantly different meanings from person to person. But one thing that kind of came up was that largely a lot of them said, well, men aren't supposed to be afraid. And I said, well, of course we are. Like that's part of life. Like, of course we're allowed to feel fear. It doesn't mean we have to be controlled by it, but of course we're allowed to. And so we started talking about the fear of rejection. Uh, and I talked about how, because no one wanted to admit they were afraid of, asking a girl out or asking anybody out. So I brought up how I said I still remember the first time I was rejected in 6th grade, and how, like, I remember how scary that was, and how sometimes I even still think about it when thinking about approaching somebody new. And uh, and when they heard that I felt that way, all of a sudden they all started opening up about their experiences and how it's not, and I said, well, that's something we start to realize, that when you go into any new situation, you don't want to go into that new situation with the same thought patterns that you had before, with the same process. So when you're processing that new situation, it's being filtered through all these old things. So if I were to go into a new situation, uh, of asking a girl out, and I'm just processing it through the fear of, 10-year-old Dash in 6th grade, that's probably it's going to be affecting what I see in my reality and how I perceive my reality. Because again, what I'm seeing is not reality; it's what's being processed and then projected back out. So one thing we talk about is shifting and reframing. Uh, where you're, like you're talking about, that repetition of any time that a negative or fearful thought comes, make a conscious effort at that moment. One, to not judge the thought that comes up, because that's just fighting. It's like, say, don't think about elephants. What are you thinking about now? Elephants.
Elephants.
So yeah, so and it's not always easy. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it too. It's something I still struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Uh, but it's when that thought comes up, you just watch it, and, almost as if like there's a disidentification with it, and then you insert the new thought that you want to have, instead of, oh, I know she's gonna say no, because I'm not gonna blow up this girl spot from 6th grade, but Olivia, I still remember you. um,
Shout out to Olivia. You know who you are.
You know who you are. No, I hope she's doing really well, actually. But instead of saying, "Oh, well, she said no," so this girl, you can say, "Oh, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm interested to find out." Or why wouldn't she say yes? Uh, or anything to that, where it's reframing that thought, and like you said, that repetition. All of a sudden, again, it's not to say that everything in life is going to happen the way that you want it to, but you will start noticing that circumstances do change, and the kind of people that you attract into your life changes. And so that idea of perception is not just an internal thing, because the external is just a projection of the internal. And I
Exactly.
think
It's
that's
exactly what you said. Your environment changes, the people around you change, everything around you change because you are the center of your life. You are projecting everything out of your life. So whoever you feel you are inside is what your experience is going to be in your outer world. It's all a kind of a reflection. It's like a mirror reflection of who you feel you are, who you believe you are, who you feel you deserve, all that stuff. It starts, like you said, from within. Yeah, I agree
yeah.
with that. I agree with that. That's definitely, again, a tool that they really should teach in schools so people understand how powerful they really are.
And I think that goes back to why I feel like that's, and again, I don't consider myself a guru. I don't consider myself an authority on any of this stuff, but it's stuff I like to introduce it to the players I work with. Uh,
Wow,
and
that's
I
amazing.
some just something to think. It's okay to think a little differently, um, to not always be stuck in logical thought, because I think that's another thing that you know. Again, I was having a conversation very very recently about um, why I love working with kids, but especially I'm out here and my niece is out here. I'm now saying she's 3 years old, and one
Oh,
of the things I love about being around kids is that they still have vivid imagination, and they haven't been beaten down by life yet. Uh,
yes,
where
yes, yes, yes.
everything just becomes, well, this is my day to day. This is all that there is. This is all there ever can be. It's just and it's not to say that we should constantly live in a state of delusion, but it's to say that possibilities and imagination, uh, imagination is everything. We there At one point a computer didn't exist until it came to somebody's imagination. You know,
Yes.
uh, and kids have vivid imaginations, and the magic of life is not lost on them yet. And I think that is, I try to tell my players, yes, if you live in your logical mind, you will never know a moment of magic in your life.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
I think, how can you not look at life and uh, feel romantic about it? Doesn't mean it's always good. Romances are not always, you know, happy go lucky, but they're beautiful. They're beautiful. There's something about life that is truly magic and shouldn't be taken for granted.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So walk me through, like, I'm just curious about, because you mentioned that before the approach was that you learned was you have to yell, you have to scream, and that's the way a person should coach, right? So once you figured out that doesn't make you happy and that
Mhm.
that's not an approach that you want to take, what is your approach now? Like, what kind of environment do you create for them, and what do you encourage, and what do you use? Like, what kind of
Well,
approach do you have?
I think on a very simplistic level is fun. I like to cultivate an environment of fun, because at the end of the day, it's a sport. We're bouncing a composite leather basketball. This leather ball, you don't even have to call it a basketball. It's literally just this like round thing, and we're throwing it into a metal rim with a nylon netting. So, at the very simplistic, on a very simplistic level, fun is the first thing I'd like to cultivate, um, while also honoring and recognizing that there is something deeper and more sacred. I think we talked about just about the idea of sports, how they can be a great medium for teaching life and understanding life,
Yes.
and that uh, it's for me at least, and some people, yeah, whatever. And I'm sure some people feel the same way about dance or about art, when they're just being in flow, or if you want to call it being in the moment. I don't mean like YOLO. If people hear me, it's like, no, I'm gonna go get shit faced, and I think YOLO becomes very nihilistic, where it's like, well, might as well, nothing matters. Let's just, just do whatever. I think being in the moment, being completely and consciously aware of everything that's happening without being stuck in compulsive thought. I think that is when you're in flow in that way. Uh,
Yes.
Beautiful. And I think sports can. It's hard to actually be good at sports when you're not completely involved in every way. If you're mentally thinking about something that's happening on the outside, it's not going to work on the inside. We talked about, you can you can prep all you want, you can practice all you want, you can do all the drills and take 1,000 shots a day. It doesn't mean that you're going to win, but there's the joy is in the journey of, and that's the game. The most fun part is the game. The most fun part of the practices and off the court stuff. So that's actually what you're asking, what my how I approach it now. I approach it from, I want them to understand that the stuff they're going to remember, the stuff that is really meaningful, is all the stuff that seems kind of boring and simple. And there is beauty in simple stuff. There is, you know, every moment that you're together are unrepeatable miracles of a moment. You'll never get this moment back. And so I really like to have that where, whether it's what we're doing on the court, or if we're hanging out and getting food afterwards, or when we were traveling on the road, and just hanging out in the hotel room and playing video games or anything, these are the moments you're going to remember, because you may win a championship. I have players who just won a state championship and they all say the same thing. It wasn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be. Because again, you're chasing that carrot.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me. Yeah, you mentioned that to me because once you win, once you get that, and then what, right? That's
And
over,
and
and
then and
then
then high and they say, oh man, but I miss just like after practice going and getting food with my friends, or going to get a smoothie or whatever. That's the important stuff, and so that's really what I like to cultivate with them, is that idea, and
yeah.
also, and then on a personal level, like an understanding, and that uh, everybody's home situation is different, and if I try to approach everybody with a one size fits all approach,
Uh,
I'm probably not going to understand. I'm not going to understand what they're going through, and I may not be able to sympathize what they're going through, but I do feel a tremendous amount of empathy for what they go through and what they're going through. So, you know, recognizing that if a kid is having an attitude that day, it's not, oh well, he just has a shitty attitude, you know, leave. It's recognized, all right, there's something. This is a symptom. This isn't the cause. This
there's
is a
something
symptom.
going on in
There's
the
something going
home.
on. So let me try to de-escalate it a little bit, and then take him aside and talk to him. And more often than not, when I come to that approach, there is something that happened. Even if it's the girl didn't call him back, or something. I'm a child of divorce. I came from a very, very angry household.
Ooh.
My brother and I were in anger management when I was 15 and he was 17. So I get
Wow.
it. Like I understand. Like, so I understand when there's stuff, and that stuff does bleed into everything. That unresolved trauma bleeds into everything. And before, I just kind of looked at it as like, well, you're interrupting my practice, so get out. Or now, oh, there's something happening right now, and there's hurt. And I think it's hard for any human, on our simplest level, to see someone hurting and not feel uh, wanting to help.
Yeah,
And
no,
that,
I like what you're saying because from I guess a general human point of view, a lot of the times if someone is acting out, if someone is, behaving in a way that seems like, oh, they're so rude, or oh, they're just so aggressive, or whatever it is, a lot of times it is a result, like you said, it's a result of something that's going on inside. That's something that happened, like you said, that's something that went on in the home. And we don't really take time to figure that out. A lot of the times we just kind of, oh, get away from me, oh, you're not good, or whatever it is, right? But I like your approach is, I want to understand where is it coming from, because a lot of times people just want to feel heard and understood.
Mm.
A lot of the times they want to be able to share. Like I think you mentioned also one time that it's not the norm for boys to share their feelings. It's not the norm for
No,
boys to
no, no,
say
no.
I love you or whatever you were mentioning before. Like that's such a like a big piece that I feel like the society is kind of getting wrong. you know?
It's well, it's a vicious cycle, right? Because it happens to us, so then it's the same thing. That's for me, where I wanted to for coaching. What I realized is I wanted to break the cycle. I was tired of the cycle of, well, my coach screamed and yelled at me, and so I'm going to scream and yell at you, and then you'll scream and yell at the next player, and this will go on and forever. And I just don't. I realized I didn't want to perpetuate that cycle anymore. Um, like you said, I mean, one of the most rewarding things I can remember in the past 5 years was uh, my niece was in town, and a couple of my players came with us to the park. And like you're saying, so there were two young boys who were playing around us, and one of my players said to the other one, "I love you." And this is something that I'm like, oh, I love the fact that they feel comfortable saying this now, because it's okay to say that. I tell my players, I don't want my players to ever go a day without thinking that I don't love them. 'Cause I mean, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. No, it's
I
a very
yeah,
it's a very important kind of small but important piece of life.
yeah. Um, I love my players, and they know it. I mean, I love getting text messages from them where they just hit me up and say the same thing, where they just want to let me know. A lot of them have gone off to college, and I'll get a random text, "Hey, coach," or but they're not really. Some say coach. For the most part, I don't really like being called coach. It feels a little weird. Um, but they'll say, "Hey, Dash, just want to let you know I love you," and like that to me, uh, that to me is everything, right? Um, but seeing them say that to each other made me realize the effect that I was having. And then seeing these two little boys say to them, one said, "You're not supposed to say you love you, I love you to another boy." And my player looked at him and he said, "Well, why? I love him. This is my brother. I love him." And the boy said, "Oh, I didn't think about it like that." And that little moment, now again, I don't know the true trajectory of that kid's life, but I know that that moment will have a significant impact, because just hearing that it's okay to be afraid, hearing that it's okay to be vulnerable. Uh, one thing with the real young guys I talk to all the time, like it's okay to cry. I personally try to cry every day. I try to, whether it's watching like a soldier coming home video, or I saw a really beautiful video the other day of a 13-year-old girl and her sisters who for her on her birthday, her foster parents adopted them. And that's just, we should be moved. We should, that's, it's okay to feel. It's okay to be brought to, you know, an overwhelming emotion, and I think that, like, hearing that my players now, when they tell each other that they love them and that they feel comfortable saying that, uh, is everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like that's very huge. To me, that feels like very huge because of the norm of the society of men are not supposed to have emotions, men are not supposed to say what they feel, men are not supposed to cry,
strong, tough.
all the stuff that we learn of the norm. And that's not really reality because men also have feelings, men also have emotions. Why not? Why can't they say how they feel? Why can't they also cry? Like that makes no sense. So for you to kind of create that safe environment where it is acceptable and you're not going to get laughed at and you will be actually kind of welcomed for saying that. That's amazing. I feel like that's super important. And like you said, it's these small little things that start a chain. Like you said, you don't know what kind of a chain it's going to start, but that starts with
It
something
feels
that simple.
it feels authentic too. I think that's the other thing is that, before my coaching career, I felt like I was playing a part. This is the part that I'm supposed to be playing. I'm supposed to be so, where now I feel much more authentic in myself. Um, and even though sometimes the players, even we make, they'll make fun of me for liking certain music or like, uh, that's one thing I try to, I was like this, there's no rules. There's no rules. There's no